Hello, everyone. Welcome to FDH Lounge mini episode 1809. This is FDH managing partner Rick Morris coming at you. And if you are catching us on our video feed, which I hope that you are, you can see for the first time, instead of doing it by just audio, that I have two great longstanding FDH Lounge dignitaries, two of our most longstanding FDH Lounge dignitaries, and they are the co-hosts of the great Kallas Remarks podcast, which I have been fortunate enough to be on a number of times. Of course, Steve Kallas, a longtime FDH Lounge dignitary, longtime media personality in the New York area, making appearances over the years on WFAN, SNY, etc. And it is always a pleasure to have Steve on for his perspective. Steve, great to be back on with you, buddy.
Great to be with both of you guys. But, you know, Rick, when you say Kallas Remarks, you have to say starring Joe Staszak and by Steve Kallas, because he's really, especially with this Eagles now, 2 out of 3 years. You know, I told them when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, when they beat Tom Brady, Joe did the pre and post game for the radio. And now he's back working for heavy.com. So that might be the reason I have to pick the Eagles. I'm just not sure yet.
Well, a couple things.
Let's hope so.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you stole my thunder. I was going to mention that he did the Eagles pregame and postgame last time when they won the Super Bowl. So, yeah, I was certainly going to get that out there. And I never mean to diminish either one of you guys, but it's a thing where Joe Staszak is, of course, as you say, a star in any circumstance, a legend of Philly media. Long-standing TV, radio, now heavy.com columnist. I ingest his columns on a regular basis. The Great Philly Pulse podcast, which I was recently privileged to be a guest on. So, Joe, always great to have you on as well, my friend. Thank you so much for making time, and congratulations on your Eagles.
I appreciate that. I'm very humbled to be in the presence of both of you, to be honest with you. But I thank you for that. Yeah, it's been a fun ride, and we have 5 more days, and hoping, I'll be as objective as I usually am, but you know where my heart lies. So
absolutely.
I was in Glendale 2 years ago, still paying off that trip, and still feeling the sting of walking out of that stadium, picking Lombardi-shaped confetti, yellow and red confetti out of my hair. So I don't want to see that again.
Well, as much as if you were thinking in the moment, we will knock the Chiefs off their throne. It didn't happen the next year, but you have a chance to do it the year after, because the Chiefs, of course, repeated last year, and here you are coming back at them again. And I will say, not to get too far into our discussion here, but it seems like the Sharps are really liking the Eagles here at one point. So this week in particular, it seems like. But as per usual, I'm going to open this up with a number of our statistical oddities for this matchup here. And this is something where, and as I said to Joe off air, now I get to see Steve's face instead of just imagining his face as I read some of these things off. So you have, we'll start with where the game is being played in New Orleans and at the Superdome. And this is an instance where both teams have played in New Orleans in a Super Bowl previously. For Kansas City, of course, it was Tulane Stadium, Super Bowl IV, defeating Minnesota. And for Philadelphia, it was Super Bowl 15 against the Oakland Raiders. That was in a loss. So as far as teams coming back to a city where they've played in a Super Bowl previously, we're looking at instances where teams actually rematched in the same, I don't know if you'd say city, but metropolitan area. So if you're looking for Philadelphia to get over this time, there is some precedent for that, as far as my Miami Dolphins, unfortunately, couldn't get it done against Washington in the 1980s. They, of course, beat Washington to have the perfect season in the early 1970s. Pittsburgh and Dallas matched up twice in Miami. Pittsburgh won both of those matchups, of course, back in the 70s. So there's some precedent for Kansas City winning this game, some precedent for Philadelphia winning the game. Taking a look at a couple of different things here, as far as we've had 3 Super Bowls in a row that have had a field goal margin. Of course, the aforementioned game in Glendale being one of those. And previously, the most that we've ever had in a row is 2. And that was New England, Carolina in the early 2000s, New England,
Eagles.
Philly. Yeah.
Eagles.
So the Eagles have been in both the 2 stretch and the 3 stretch of this happening. Spoiler alert, I don't think it's going to be a 4th year of it being a field goal. That would just seem too fluky, I think, if that continued. In terms of, this is something that I found that was very interesting. Credit to Wikipedia for this one, which is where I find a lot of stuff. A lot of times my eyes just kind of scan the page and I just look for what jumps out at me.
Sure.
In the first 24 Super Bowls, the losing team in the game had 10 or less points on 13 occasions, 13 out of the first 24 Super Bowls. Now, double digits, that 10 points, that weighs in a lot because it wasn't single digits a lot of times. There were a lot of those games that ended with the losing team having 10 points. But still, in the 34 Super Bowls since then, it has only happened 6 times. So that's really sort of a testament to where the game has gone offensively over a period of time, that it is very rare for the losing team to be held to 10 points or less. This is the first ever February 9th Super Bowl, so we have no precedent to look back on. There are no trends as far as a February 9th Super Bowl. And, of course, this is of particular interest to you, Joe. This is the rubber match in major championships between Kansas City and Philadelphia. We have the aforementioned Super Bowl from 2 years ago, but the thing that went your way much, much further back, the 1980 World Series, where the Philadelphia Phillies, of course, defeated the Kansas City Royals. So best 2 out of 3. It's all on the line here, Joe.
Nice. Yeah, Tug McGraw striking out Willie Wilson in that game.
That's right. That's right. Winner takes it all, Joe.
That's right. Good stuff. That's great stuff, man.
Well, thank you. Thank you. A little bit in the way of oddities.
George Brett, Quisenberry, UL Washington. I remember all those guys.
Hey, Rick.
Yeah.
Can I give you one stat that I found interesting, but certainly not this positive? And from ESPN. So in the history of the Super Bowl, there have only been 4 occasions, this being the 4th occasion, where the starting quarterbacks had played each other multiple times. Okay. The first one, and you guys will remember all of them: Terry Bradshaw, Steelers; Roger Staubach, Cowboys; Terry Bradshaw and the Steelers, 2-0. The team that won the first won the second. Troy Aikman, Jim Kelly. You know, Jim Kelly lost 4 in a row, so it's Troy Aikman 2, Jim Kelly none.
Okay.
Eli Manning beat the evil empire not once, but twice.
Yes.
Eli 2, Tom Brady nothing. And here we have Pat Mahomes, Jalen Hurts. I know Joe doesn't want to hear this stat, but Pat Mahomes 1, Jalen Hurts nothing. I don't put a lot of emphasis on this. I just thought it's interesting. And the guy that won the first one also won the second one.
Sure.
I'll give you one more quickly.
Yeah. What do you got?
And we'll see what Rick thinks, Joe, because you and I have talked about this a lot. Longest win streak in a one-possession game, one-score game. The Patriots from 2003 to 2004 had the record 13 games in a row when it was a one-score game they won. The Chiefs have now surpassed that from 2023 to this year. They now are up to 17. But what I've talked about with Joe, and I think we agree, is that if you're down 8, to me, that's not a one-score game. That's a 2-score game because you have to make a 2-point conversion. Yeah. What do you think about that?
I think so. The one thing that I would say is, and I'm not a big fan of whatever it was they did a couple of years ago. I don't remember if they narrowed the goalposts a little bit or whatever it was. It was something like, well, let's not make PATs automatic anymore. Well, I'm not really a fan of what they did with that. So it's still much harder to get a 2-point conversion. So I think I see your point. I think I agree with you on that one there. And that's a very good one. By the way, not to be a dark cloud here for Joe, but if we're going to look at precedent based on what you said, who did the 2004 Patriots beat in the Super Bowl? So
say that again.
Who did the 04 Patriots beat in the Super Bowl? It was Philadelphia. So,
really? Sure.
But again, so Philadelphia has the chance to roll back a lot of history with a win here. And in order to look at this a little bit more conventionally, I'm going to give you guys the statistical breakdown here. This is on the main page at fantasydrafthelp.com. You can go click that on the main page. It's the 2024-25 FDH end of regular season breakdown. Credit to Pro Football Reference for most of the statistics that I'm about to give you here. The one statistic that comes from FDH is our end of season power rankings. Now, in the final index, which is just crunching all these numbers together, Philadelphia placed 4th in the league for the season on the first tier, behind in this order: Detroit, Baltimore, Green Bay, and then ahead of Minnesota on the first tier. The second tier, 6 through 10, is Tampa Bay, Denver, LA Chargers, Kansas City, and Buffalo. And then the third tier goes from 11 to 18. So, and looking at this here, the one number courtesy of FDH is our power rankings. That's the first part of the index. Philadelphia was 6th in our final power rankings. Kansas City was 2nd. So of the other numbers from Pro Football Reference, the SRS, which is essentially their version of statistical power rankings by their formula. Philadelphia ended the year 5th, Kansas City 10th. Margin of victory, Philadelphia 2nd, Kansas City 11th. The one huge thing that Kansas City has going in its favor, which really hasn't mattered yet for Philadelphia, largely because of who they played, including Washington, who was also very soft in this one. Strength of schedule, Philadelphia 30th and Kansas City 11th. So Kansas City a lot more battle-tested. OSRS, so this is the offensive power ranking for each team. Philadelphia 8th, Kansas City 15th. Offensive yards per play, Philadelphia 11th, Kansas City 21st. Third down offensive percentage, Philadelphia is converting at a rate 10th in the league, and Kansas City 2nd in the league. So they've been able to extend drives. DSRS, defensive power rankings. Not a surprise, Philadelphia cleans up here. 1st in the league, Kansas City 3rd in the league. Defensive yards per play, Detroit 1st, Kansas City 9th. Third down defense, so percentage of times that you stop teams on third down. Philadelphia 3rd. I'm surprised by this one, and the Spagnuolo defense, 26th. So we may see this come into play here, particularly with Philadelphia and the strong rushing offense and the ability to extend plays. So I'm going to see what you guys think about these numbers and what they tell you. I'll start with you, Steve. What kind of jumps out at you, if anything, from some of the numbers I just read?
I think the basic problem with the numbers is when it comes to the Chiefs, and we did this last year. The Chiefs were 4-4 their regular season. The only difference to me between last year and this year is they didn't lose as many games. Mm-hmm. But Joe and I talked all year about, well, the Chiefs won, but, they blocked the field goal to beat Denver, or, there's 3 or 4 other games just like that where you're thinking not only were they outplayed, they should have lost, but they don't lose. And the beauty of the Chiefs, for lack of a better term, is you just kind of have a feeling that somehow, some way, and now there's 3 years of it to prove it. And I'll just give you an example. On paper, I think most people thought Buffalo was better than the Chiefs. And I think on paper, Buffalo was better than the Chiefs. Last year, I admit, I picked the Ravens to beat the Chiefs. And I think on paper, the Ravens were better than the Chiefs. And then, of course, I learned my lesson. So, of course, I went to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. But I think until, as Joe always says, until you stick the knife in poor Mahomes and twist it, make sure he's not getting up.
Dracula, you got to put that stake through his heart.
Yeah.
Right. Having said that, what I look at now is what they've done recently. And do the Chiefs seem better? Yeah, the Chiefs seem better. I mean, this the first time they scored over 30 points last week. First time they scored 30 or more points was last week. So it's hard for me to take the regular season stats, although some of them really are important. I agree. But to me, frankly, it just comes down to, will they be able to stop Barkley? These stats are crazy. In the last 18 playoff games that the Chiefs have played, they have not allowed a 100-yard rusher. They have not allowed rushing touchdowns. They've allowed 2 rushing touchdowns in the last 18 playoff games over 6 yards. Yet you look at what Barkley does, it looks like he goes, I said this with Joe last week, it looks like he goes around, left end. And it could be, if you're watching old films of Jim Taylor and Paul Hornung on the Vince Lombardi with a seal here and a seal there, and he goes right out there. And that's what Barkley has done, at times?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure, what I do know from these stats is the Chiefs are not that great against the run. Spag's going to have some kind of play. And if he has some kind of play, to me, Jalen Hurts looked the best that he looked last week throwing the ball. And he looked like he could run. You could tell me he's hurt. He's got a brace. He took it off. But when he has to run, he could run. So it's almost like a triple threat now. If you put 8 or more in the box, you got 2 great wide receivers. A.J. Brown is great, I think. And they got a good tight end. And I'll say it again. I saw, again, some things on ESPN in the first 2 games of the playoffs versus his third game. He had 259 total yards in the first 2 games combined and 246 in the last game. And then the other thing that I noticed was he had 15% off target in the first 2 games and only 4% in the last game. Now, you can tell me correctly. And look, I thought Washington could make it a game. I thought the Commanders could make it a game. Mm-hmm. But you can tell me the Commanders' defense is not the Chiefs' defense, and that's correct. But my point was, from looking, the eye test, if you will, of Hurts, it's not, oh, is he hurt? It's not, oh, is he throwing is he throwing bad passes? It wasn't any of that. And he could run, which I don't know that he could do the first 2 games. I just don't know. Give him an extra week. And I know Joe can go into the center and Dickerson and what's going on there. But they seem pretty healthy. I did hear today for the first time that the Chiefs are totally healthy. So, we'll see where that takes us. But to me, frankly, it's more about what's happening in the actual playoffs. Remember last year, Mahomes has never won a road playoff game. They're in trouble.
Yeah.
What happened? So those rules don't seem to apply to the Chiefs. But I'll say it seems to me the Eagles have a really good chance to end that streak, if you will.
You would think so, yeah. And before I pick Joe's brain here, just to follow up on 2 things that you said, 2 callbacks from recently, one of them on air, and that is the one as far as the rushing statistics and everything like that. That was something that we had commented on previously, was that, again, that Philadelphia it is sort of the irresistible force, the immovable object when you're looking at them versus Kansas City with that defense. I will also say, too, that this was noted off air, that between myself and FDH Lounge dignitary Anthony Petrone, as we were watching the NFC Championship game, the touchdown, the 60-yard run or whatever it was that Barkley had right off the bat there, I said, with that blocking, you and I could have made it to the secondary. Now, we would have been murdered in the secondary, but he took it the rest of the way. That's the difference between him and the rest of us walking the face of the earth here. But Joe, your thoughts on the game and what, if anything, any of the statistics are telling us about it?
Well, I mean, games aren't won on paper, and I don't take a ton from the regular season, except it shows a modicum of consistency. And in my opinion, I think Barkley, he was the MVP this year. I really do. I think he was the best player, at least in the NFC. And they're going to have to find a way to stop him. I mean, look, technically the Rams got better in the second game, and they gave up 205 yards to him because they gave up 255 the first time. He just – and remember, he slid in the Green Bay game where he'd have another 60-yard run. He slid to end the game. Right. So – It amazes me that the one thing teams do all week is to try to stop Barkley from embarrassing them, and that's exactly what he ends up doing. A first play of the game against the Redskins, he's gone. 2 bombs against the Redskins in the earlier game season, 2 bombs against 2 70-yard runs against the Rams in the first game. He had 303. He had more yards from scrimmage than the Rams had total yards in that game. Like, he can take over a game. Not a fumbler. Jalen Hurts does what he needs to do. All he does is win. He's like the coach. You know what I mean? Like, you kind of wonder, like, yeah, of course I'd give the edge to Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. To me, it should not be as close as it's probably going to be, because if you want to go down position by position, and check off who probably has the edge, or at least statistically, or the better players, you're going to see a lot on the green side. But Patrick Mahomes doesn't just get 1 check; he gets like 5 checks, because he's Patrick Mahomes. And I think I saw a stat. Last 20 years, maybe, there have been 125 situations in the last minute of a playoff game where a team had the ball down either less than a score and could possibly win the game, or a 1-score game and send it to overtime. And I think 125 times. Brady was 5 of 11. I thought that was a little low for him, but that's still not bad. Mahomes is 7 of 7. You know what I mean? He's won 17 playoff games. He's lost 3. I know they said last year, oh, he can't win a road game. Well, he never had to play a road game, really. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
They're always at home. They're always at home. The 3 losses they had, 2 are to Brady. 1 was the D Ford game. They probably deserved a better fate than that when D Ford was offside and Brady's third pick. Steve likes when I bring that up all the time. The D Ford game, and the other one was the Super Bowl where I think Patrick Mahomes. They calculated he ran 495 yards behind the line of scrimmage because he was running for his life all day. They had offensive line issues that they fixed up the next year, and then he look, one time he did choke, and it's not without the realm of possibility. And he admitted it. He choked. A lot of guys wouldn't say, they'd give credit to the other team. He choked in the Bengals game. They had an 18-point lead in the first half, and they lost in overtime when he threw an interception, and McPherson hit a field goal, and that's Cincinnati's only trip to the Super Bowl under Joe Burrow. But he's Patrick Mahomes. I mean, if you're going to pick a side to bet, I actually think the Eagles – I'm going to favor them, not because I'm from here. I look at it objectively because of everything I take into account. Defense, defense. How many times do we have to say defense? Usually, give me the defense and the quarterback. And quarterback goes to KC. Defense goes to the Eagles. They don't give up a lot of home runs. They keep things underneath. I think they've only given up 7 really big plays this year defensively in their secondary. But the Chiefs always trot out something that you haven't seen before, wouldn't expect. Listen, Devontae Parker, good receiver. Juju Schuster-Smith, good receiver. Possession guys, they can make some plays. But then you have Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy who can fly. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't be surprised if they took some shots on the rookies. You got 2 rookies out there playing their first Super Bowl. And Quinyon Mitchell.
They're real good, though. They're real good.
They are real good. Mm-hmm. But the rookies, I would all right, rookie, let's see. You're in the Super Bowl now. I'd maybe max protect a couple times and take some shots. But the Eagles do such a good job of keeping everything underneath. And when they do have man coverage and maybe the safety doesn't get over it, DeJean, he's great at man coverage, and so is Quinyon Mitchell. My concern is that Vic Fangio is 0-8 against Patrick Mahomes. Now, maybe he hasn't had the players, but 0-8 is 0-8. Conversely, now he has a lot of information on how to maybe shift that narrative, but he's 0-8 against Patrick Mahomes. And Steve Spagnuolo always seems to find a way, and he did it against the Niners in overtime, coming at you from ways you didn't expect as a quarterback. So I think Jalen Hurts is going to have to figure out where they're coming from. He makes all the calls now and the protection calls now that Kelsey's gone. He does all that, does a good job of that. A lot of times those Barkley bombs are plays that Hurts is checked out of and into those plays. And him and Barkley have a thing that, we see something over here. Let's do that. And you're right. You have Jordan Mailata who just, barreled over people in that Washington game to let folks free. Mekhi Becton is downfield, keeping up with Barkley in the Rams game, blocking downfield. They get downfield and they block, but you get past that second level, that's where you have to decide if you're the Chiefs. All right, are we going to crowd the box? Because if you can get past that box, these cornerbacks aren't going to catch them. And also, I would spread out the receivers. I wouldn't, keep them in tight. So if the Chiefs are going to blitz, it's going to make it a little difficult when they have to cover guys, or maybe a corner is going to have to come from deeper. It's going to be a chess match. I would certainly favor Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo on that, as you've seen so many times late in games. He ran those little corn dog plays that the Eagles weren't ready for 2 years ago. Those little motion digs, and then boom, they scored a touchdown on it. I think it was Mecole Hardman in the overtime against San Francisco. Is wide open because they start to do a motion play. He stops. Meanwhile, the cornerback or the linebacker who's following can never get back in time. And it's a quick little, almost like a wheel route. And, you got to give credit to Andy Reid. He comes up with stuff that you haven't seen before, and you'll see it in the fourth quarter. And they are a very good fourth quarter team. In their first Super Bowl that they won against San Francisco, 21 points in the last 7 minutes to win that game. They were down 10, 17 points against the Eagles in the fourth quarter of the game 2 years ago. And, you could say, well, the Eagles choked or collapsed, but listen, the Chiefs are consistently doing that to teams. They were down 10 to the Eagles. They won the Super Bowl. They were down 10 to San Francisco twice, won those Super Bowls. They were down 24 to the Texans the first year they won. And then they came from 10 down, I think, against the Titans, and then in the Super Bowl. But, I mean, no lead is really too big. And I that's why I think the Eagles were on their way to get to a 14-point lead in Super Bowl 2 years ago when Jalen fumbled on the tush push. Well, it was supposed to be a tush push. Isaac Seumalo jumped, and then it became 4th and 6, and they went for it. And he just dropped the ball. Nick Bolton ran in for a touchdown, tied the game. Eagles still went up 10 at the half, but that was a big difference in the game. That was, people say that he outplayed Mahomes. Yeah, he was really good, but that was a big. You got to factor that in too. He didn't protect the ball, take care of it there, and it was a 14 or at least a 10-point swing in that game, and it cost him. You have to almost play mistake.
Yeah. Well,
Rick, if I could add one thing to what Joe said about Vic Fangio.
Okay. Yeah.
The 0-8. Now look, 0-6 was in Denver, and Denver wasn't very good, and Fangio wasn't a great head coach. But the interesting thing, in addition to the 0-8, is that when they recently played the Eagles in the Super Bowl, Vic Fangio had become an advisor to the Eagles. So,
yeah.
And the final, as you know, was 38-35. So take that for what it's worth. But I don't think anyone doubts how good a defensive coordinator Vic Fangio is.
Oh, right. And I have painful memories last year of the Miami playoff game against Kansas City, which the Fish were never in that one in the first place, in all fairness. Quick follow-up question for you, Joe, about Hurts, because I think it feels weird to say that one of the biggest X factors of a game, if not the biggest one, is one of the two quarterbacks, because they're such a visible position and everything. But as far as the range of possibilities for Jalen Hurts, that's something that really feels like it's very much in play, how that's going to go. And that's one of those things where, again, as has been noted previously, Jalen Hurts is at his worst by far when he does not have a healthy A.J. Brown. He's had that most of his time in Philadelphia. Like when A.J. Brown's been out, he's been crap. But he's going to have him here. And that's one of those things, I will say, in fairness, by the way, if we back up about 20 years to Donovan Mitchell, I felt, and I was saying so on the Sports Talk Network in the 2000s, that I felt like on sort of like the first and second wave of mobile quarterbacks, that the teams did them a disservice. Because it was just like, well, what do you need a number one receiver for? You can win it all yourself. Because it wasn't until Mitchell had, or McNabb had. I got calves on the brain.
I know.
Donovan McNabb. Donovan. It wasn't until Donovan McNabb had Terrell Owens, right? That he really had that kind of weapon. Yep. So but my question to you about Hurts is looking at this, something that had been noted when we did our Championship Sunday preview on the show here, that Jalen Hurts until recently went from being all noun, part verb, based on the way that he'd gotten banged up here. So any concerns about that whatsoever, or the fact that he looked good against Washington and he's got the 2 weeks here? Do you think that that's going to be an issue?
No, I don't think so. I didn't think the knee was that big of a deal anyway. They had him running bootlegs against the Rams late in the game. Sirianni and Moore came under a lot of heat for that, but I didn't think it was that bad. And reading between the lines, watching him up there, and they already gave him the go ahead. And they said he was going to play next week right after the game. He finished the game. I didn't think that was a big deal. I think the brace was precautionary, and he didn't like the way it felt. And I thought when he runs the RPO, he'll do that occasionally. You'll see him. In fact, that's how he got the concussion against Washington on one of those long runs off tackle. But no, when he needs to play and when he needs to sling it, like he can sling it. He can't hold on to the ball like he did against the Rams and get sacked 7 times. I'll give some credit to the Rams. I thought they just came off a 9-sack game against Detroit, but can't be doing that against Washington. At times he was chased, threw it away, did a much better job at that. But he also, when he plays in a rhythm, and this is why I like when they play up tempo, but they don't like to do that too much. They like to slow the game down a little bit and run the ball. So I have no concerns about Jalen Hurts, except that he's probably going to play like Jalen Hurts, and he plays pretty well in big games. He really does, and he's been playing on the big stages since he was at Oklahoma and Alabama. played in three title games at those two schools, or 3 playoffs, but 2 title games with Alabama. Played in a Super Bowl. Wasn't phased by the moment, except for dropped the ball after a penalty that moved him back, which it was kind of a domino effect. But I'm not concerned at all. I think AJ and Devontae, they both had almost 100-yard games against the Chiefs 2 years ago, and they put up a lot of points. They didn't play scared. In fact, it was the most points scored by a losing team in any Super Bowl, 35 points.
Right.
So so that happened, but no, I'm not concerned about him at all.
Okay, all right. I agree with you on that. I was just curious about your perspective. So, to get some more thoughts from each of you on anything that we didn't cover yet before we get ultimately to our picks here, I'll start with you on this one, Steve. Just anything that we didn't get to yet that you're thinking could be significant factors in the game, or even if it doesn't seem that significant on the surface, something that could play a difference and maybe tip the scales one way or another.
I think how good the Eagles defense is on all 3 levels. We haven't mentioned Brandon Graham. It looks like he's going to play, last I heard. And when he comes back, even though he hasn't played in a long time, he's able to be one of those in the old days of the Eagles. And it happened this year, but not as much, I think. They had 6 or 7 guys. They just ran them in the defensive line. They just ran them in and out the whole game, and they were always fresh. And so I think Graham just coming back, is going to motivate them tremendously. As Joe will remind us, he had the greatest play in the history of the Eagles, right? He stripped Tom Brady.
Tom Brady, same arm that he ripped his triceps on.
And so I think he brings just by being in uniform and being there. But if he can play, I'll just even say 15, 20 plays. I think that's a big factor because it's going to give other guys rest. What the Chiefs did against Buffalo is they came out, it was like 11 against 7. They just went down the field. The danger, I guess, we haven't talked about Reed with a bye week, if you will, but his 2-week record is like phenomenal. I think it was like 29-5 or something incredible. I don't know the exact number, but Reed given time. And I think Joe's right. I think he said this on Kallas' remarks. Chiefs have the better quarterback. They have the better head coach. They have the better defensive coordinator. But pretty much all the other players, not all, but, Chris Jones, Karlaftis has become a star. McDuffie's great. But if you go man for man on the Eagles offensively and defensively, nobody compares with Barkley on the Chiefs running. And the other final thing I'll talk about that we haven't mentioned is the first time, I never forget when they put this stat up in game 2, Bills-Chiefs. The Bills beat the Chiefs 30-21 during the regular season. They put rushing yards from Mahomes against the Bills in the week 10 or whatever week it was, 0. Every time he ran the ball, I think he had like 5 10-yard runs. He didn't have like 80, 90 yards. He had like 45 or 55 yards. But every time he ran, it seemed it was on 3rd down and he ran for a 1st down. And the Bills even tried to have a spy. Matt Milano, pretty athletic guy, but it's like, when Patrick Mahomes needs to get 8 yards, he gets 9. When he needs 11, he gets 12. He needs 6, he gets 7. So it's uncanny what he can do with his legs. And he's not Lamar, the great sprinter or anything like that. You can argue he's not even Josh Allen, although in that game he looked much better than Josh Allen, frankly. And so I think his ability to run, and I don't know if maybe Joe knows if they're going to have a spy on him and if they have somebody athletic enough to spy on him. But I think his running is going to be a key, just as it was in the Buffalo game. I won't say it's what won the game, but it certainly set up a bunch of big-time plays that the Chiefs made later in his possessions. And I think didn't he run in one time and knock a guy over also if he had?
He ran 11 times. I think he ran 2 against them earlier in the year.
Don't try this at home. But I think that's a big factor. But really maybe the freshness of the Eagles' defense throughout a game. And Joe is right about the rookies, but boy, those 2 rookies are really, really good. So I think partly what Mahomes does with his legs and partly what the Eagles defense can do, especially now, I think with the defensive line, if they have more up front, they'll be even fresher for the whole game.
Yeah, and absolutely. And by the way, when you talk about player edges, team versus team, Kansas City has, as you said, probably the air at this point too. I mean, if we even want to compare anybody to Aaron Donald, but I mean, that's basically Chris Jones right now. He sort of takes the mantle. However, breathing down his neck is Jalen Carter. So you've got a guy that's really kind of doing it there. I will say, again, that is a little bit of a situation we saw against Washington. It didn't hurt them tremendously so, but the loss of Nakobe Dean, which was something we had talked about when I was on my guest appearance on the Philly Pulse podcast a couple of weeks ago here. So we have to see how that manifests itself, being without one of their key pieces in the Super Bowl, and how that possibly affects what you're talking about, Steve, with the whole strength of three levels thing here. Didn't really hurt them that much against Washington, although the way that the game was out of hand, it really is kind of hard to measure that. So, Joe, any other thoughts that you have on any factors that we really haven't gotten to, whether they be big or small, that you think could change the trajectory of the game?
Well, one thing concerns me, if I was an Eagles fan, and I am, Harrison Butker, he's money. He's just money from wherever he is. And Jake Elliott has made one kick from 50 yards, I think, in 9 attempts this year. So that could be an issue. And he's missed 3 extra points in the first 2 playoff games. The other thing, when you mentioned Jalen Carter, I'm hearing talk about, I think Joe Thuney's the best Chiefs offensive lineman at left tackle, and they're talking about maybe moving him inside at times, because if you're going to keep him out there, you could have Carter just going to, right in the A gaps against the guards, he could just eat those guys up. So they're going to have to figure out a way, maybe in the first quarter, and a little bit of a rotation on the offensive line to kind of keep Carter at bay, because while he's not Aaron Donald, and I wouldn't call him Chris Jones yet either, he can wreck a game. Yeah, I mean, the Rams were 13 yards away from, eliminating the Eagles, and he came in with a huge sack, and he also had a sack earlier in the game, and he kind of took over that game. And he's in good shape. And I know, like you said, Steve, with Brandon Graham, if he's in the lineup, I don't know many snaps he'll get, but the rotation on to keep them fresh. Steve, I will say this, that Vic Fangio does not usually like to spy a quarterback. It could go with a mush rush, because Patrick Mahomes, if you look at some of the huge plays he's made in games to win playoff games, Super Bowls, 26-yard run against the Eagles to set that up, that whole field goal at the end 2 years ago. He's done it to the Bengals, and then of course he'll take a 15-yard penalty, which it was in that game. I'm not going down that referee path, but maybe a mush rush of some sort, because he can really sting you with his legs. I think he's an underrated quarterback, and a lot of times they won't even. The thing about the Chiefs is they'll do something you haven't seen before. I'm like, oh wow, I didn't expect that, and that's why they're so well coached, and they're very buttoned up, and they have experience. I mean, they're used to this. This is their third in a row, 4 and 5 years. I mean, they know how long you get to warm up. They know how to deal with the long halftime and whatever. I mean, the Eagles were here 2 years ago, but they have 12 different starters now, which is a testament to Howie Roseman, how he's built 3 different teams with 3 quarterbacks and 2 different head coaches, and took them to 3 Super Bowls in 8 years. So did a nice job, especially after the Wentz thing blew up, who's now a backup with the Chiefs. Ironically, how quickly he turned that debacle into a Super Bowl team by hiring unknown coaches. And Nick Sirianni was a 39-year-old one-time offensive coordinator, and had a rough start, but finished 9-8, went to the playoffs, lost to Tom Brady, which everyone does. And then next year they're in the Super Bowl. And, if Jalen Hurts was healthy and didn't get hurt in that Bears game in late December, they probably lose 1 game that year. It's going to be interesting. Look, the Chiefs have lost 1 game this year. Forget about the last game against the Broncos. They haven't lost since, except to the Bills, that Christmas game against the Raiders 2 Christmases ago. I mean, and then you have the Eagles, who haven't lost with Jalen Hurts in the lineup start to finish since September 29th. And if Barkley and Devontae Smith catch those balls, those easy little pitch and catches, they might have lost 1 game this year. So it's gonna be interesting. Both teams have had great years. I know people say, well, Patrick Mahomes hasn't had a great year. Oh, really? He's lost 1 game. I'll take that over gaudy numbers like Lamar Jackson put up, but had 5 or 6 losses. I'll take Patrick and his wins and losses versus gaudy numbers like 42 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, that maybe Lamar Jackson had. I will take wins over losses and protecting the football, which he does. He hasn't thrown a pick in 9 games. It was that Buffalo loss where he threw his last pick. He doesn't throw picks very often in the postseason. I don't think he threw any last year. I don't believe, well, he hasn't thrown any this year. So he protects the ball as well, too. I think, again, in big games, I don't think it's a team that makes the big plays or more big plays. It's the team that makes the fewest mistakes. And I think to beat the Chiefs, the Eagles are going to have to play really close to mistake-free football.
I would agree with that. I think they definitely are. And in terms of gaudy numbers, may I say that picks on the season here, +9 going into this year. So trying for our 4th season since 2016 of being above 52.4%, i.e. profitable on all the games of the season.
Awesome.
Part of it is, well, thank you. Well, part of it is, here's what saved me during the playoffs, is going 11-3 on the totals, because I'm giving out game scores every week on this too. I actually had to go back and I need to count the totals in here since I gave out the game score.
Sure.
So what I'm going to do, I got to go +6 on the Super Bowl here. So I thought to myself, is it easier to try and pick 6 different plays, or I'm going to try for 8 out of 10? So I'm going to give you 10 of them right here. I got to stick 8 of these ones on this here. My pick for the final score is Philadelphia 31, Kansas City 26. So there's 3 of my picks right there. Philly +1, Philly on the money line, right. Total over 49. Right. Here are my other picks, and some of these are based on some of the things that we've said during the show here. As was pointed out, Mahomes over 6.5 rush attempts, because you know that they're going to use his wheels here, as has been the case in the playoffs. Worthy over 1.5 rushing attempts. They like to do, some of the trick plays here. You're going to see that. If Philadelphia wins, this one's a gimme. A.J. Brown over 69.5 receiving yards. I mean, either both are happening or neither is happening.
Right.
As goes Jalen Hurts, so goes A.J. Brown, and vice versa. Pirine over 15 receiving yards for Kansas City. They have used him as a little bit of a gimmick there. Mahomes, again, over 29.5 rushing yards. That goes hand in hand with the attempts. Under 7.5 players with a rushing attempt in the game. And Hurts over 0.5 interceptions. I think he'll have 1. I just don't think it'll be one that ends up putting them away. By the way, the 31-26, I have Kansas City going for a 2-point conversion and not making it. So that's how it ends up. It would be 31-27. If they made it, it would be 31-28, and we'd have the 4th Super Bowl in a row with a field goal margin. But I said before, I teased it, I don't think it's going to happen. So, Counselor, I will throw it to you here. What's your thought for the Super Bowl on how this one goes? I think I know where you're going to go with this.
Yeah, but one final thing that I forgot to mention, and that's a running game for the Chiefs. Pacheco hasn't been Pacheco.
Right.
We've watched him over the years, and we all have. When he hits a guy, he still goes forward 2 yards after he hits a guy.
Yep.
A violent runner, but I don't think he's been the same since he's come back from injury. He just hasn't been the same. I don't know if this is the game with another 2 weeks of rest that he breaks out, but he's a factor. I'm still going to go Chiefs, as you might have guessed, because I thought I learned my lesson last year when I picked the Ravens to beat them. And I know Joe can name more. I can name 10 things on why the Eagles can win, just as everyone could name 10 things on why the Bills could win. And I remember I watch NFL Live all the time. I think Mina Kimes sometimes knows more than Dan Orlovsky and the other professional football players she's doing it with. But both Mina Kimes and Ryan Clark picked the Bills last week. And I was just surprised because somehow, I can't tell you how the Chiefs are going to win, but somehow they find a way. Somehow they make these plays. Do they get the calls every once in a while? I would agree that they do. Maybe Joe doesn't want to say it because he's an Eagles fan.
No, they do. They do. They really do.
And I know Mike Lupick, a famous sports writer in New York, he wrote a whole column about, if you don't like the Chiefs, you should understand you're watching history. And if you think they get the calls, that's really ridiculous. And he mentioned a bunch of plays. But what I remember in that game, and Joe and I talked about it, was he flopped out of bounds. It was like a soccer game.
Yeah.
He was running out of bounds. He got like a love tap on the way out, and he threw his hands up, and he flopped out of bounds. I wish somebody would have said, I love Mahomes.
Yeah.
But I wish somebody would have said, now, hold it now. This is beyond the pale, even for the Chiefs. The refs didn't go for it on that particular play. Does he have the advantage? I think they do have the advantage. It might be unbiased. It might be in the referee's mind. It's not like an affirmative bias, but I think they do get the breaks on some calls. And that flop was one to me that really stood out that, of course, Mike Lupica didn't mention in his article because it wouldn't have gone with the narrative. But I still think somehow, some way, I can't tell you they're going to stop Barkley. And if they stop Barkley, then it'll be, well, Spags came up with something. I'm more in line with Joe and even you, Rick, where what Andy Reid does with the first 15 plays of a game, and that's what they always talk about, for whatever reason, the Chiefs have 2 or 3 new things. They go up and down the field. It'll be interesting to me who gets the ball first.
I was just going to say, I think that's going to be a key. I like taking the ball second.
If the Eagles get the ball first and Barkley breaks any kind of run, the over-under for a run, you guys might laugh at this, but again, I saw it on NFL Live today. The over-under in one of these ESPN bet things, I've never looked at ESPN bet, is Barkley to get a run over 23.5 yards. Now, if you watch the whole season or just the playoffs, 23.5 yards, that's like half a run or a third of a run.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I find the first possession. Now, will everybody defer like they normally do? I think Bill Belichick invented the everybody defers. I don't know. But I think if they defer and, for example, the Eagles get the ball first and Barkley breaks one for 40, 50 yards, you're like, uh-oh. But if the Eagles win and defer and, the Chiefs go down like they did against the Bills, the first time they had the ball was 11-7. It was like a street game. There was no contest. So I think that's more important. Normally, I think when someone says, oh, we'll take the ball first, I think that can be stupid. I'm not so sure, and I'll be interested what Joe has to say on that issue. If the Eagles win the toss, should they defer under the age-old get it before halftime, get it after halftime? Or do they want to give the ball to Barkley 2 or 3 times in the first series of the beginning of the Super Bowl and show the Chiefs, ooh, this might not be your night. We'll see what happens.
Chiefs.
Okay.
I'll go Chiefs, and I'll give you a little smaller score. I'll go Chiefs 23-17, and each team is held to 2 touchdowns and field goal kickers. And Joe makes a great point about the difference in the field goal kickers in this game. Somehow Butker gets them over the hump.
Okay, Chiefs and the under. Joe, you're the tiebreaker, and I think I know who you're siding with.
I am always about deferring because I like the possibility of scoring at the end of the half and then getting the ball first. In the second
I do that on Madden all the time.
I've always liked that, and I like my defense starting first. Although against the Chiefs, Steve's right. When the plays are scripted, Eagles have gotten a lot better through the first 13 games of the year. They only had 17 points in the first quarter of the first 13 games. They've been able to break through that, and they've scored some points. They scored the first touchdown 2 years ago, went right down the field. Then KC came back. It was 7-7, 10-point lead. KC scores right out of the gate in the second half, and it's a ball game. So I think that is important, and I think both teams would defer if winning the toss. But I think that's critical. I think, and I predicted this in the win against the Patriots, and it's really hard to win a Super Bowl. There are a lot of teams who've sniffed and never have gotten close again. Look, Tennessee, Kevin Dyson stopped 1 yard short of tying that game against the Rams. There have been other Scott Norwood missed the kick and then come back 3 times in a row and they lose all 3. But there have been times where other teams have, Carolina had were they 15-1 and they got smoked against the Broncos and never sniffed it again. It's really hard to do. It's really hard to go 19-0. And the Patriots were a 12.5-point favorite over the Giants in 2007. You figure, and they already beat them at the end of the year. This is going to be the Patriots. But it's just hard to do. To win 3 in a row, I mean, you just got to tip your cap if they do it because no one's ever done it, and that would be historic. I think that they're going to have the ball. I go 34-27 Eagles, and they stop Mahomes like no one else has been able to do in the last few years on the final drive, whether it's an interception, a fumble, or on downs, and no penalty flags.
Brandon Graham.
How about, now, would that be poetic?
Statue.
Yeah.
He'll get a statue if he does that.
Oh my God! Right.
Well, as far as me being the big Office super fan on the show here, how does Kansas City keep getting it done? I might perhaps theorize that they have a copy of Michael Scott's memoirs, Somehow I Manage, because it does seem like that would be something that would be right up their alley. But gentlemen, it is always a pleasure to get both of you guys on here to break down anything. great to have you on here to break down the Super Bowl. And for the first time to be able to get you guys on here for video, that just adds all the more to it. Very, very excited. Actually, both of you date back to when we were at the old Sports Talk Network. So there was back then. Yeah. So you guys were there. So we've talked about this recently. This is actually sort of coming full circle on all of that. And the opening days to when we got both of you guys on, I think both of you guys date back to about 2009 or so. So it's a real pleasure to have both of you on. And I can't say enough great things about what it is to break something down with you guys, regardless of sport. We've done it on any number of sports, and we will do it again. But my thanks to both of you for being here and being a part of this. It was very special for me.
So much fun, guys. I always appreciate you asking me on. I always love doing stuff with Steve, twice a week during football. It's just so much fun. So I appreciate it, and go Birds.
A great pleasure for me to be with both of you guys.
Too.
Yeah. Well, and I speak for not just the folks in Philadelphia, but everyone outside of the Kansas City metro area. Go Birds! We're sick of all of the whole hype train for Kansas City. I have theorized that this regular season, just in a lot of ways, I felt was kind of a snooze. Just sort of seemed maybe a little bit under the radar, kind of anticlimactic. I think people are just kind of tired of Kansas City being up there,
fatigue.
I think it is. And it's something that the league hasn't had to face before because, as we've talked about, whether it be San Francisco in 1990 or whether it be Pittsburgh in 76, Dallas in 94, the team that's going for the three-peat usually gets stopped on Championship Sunday. Didn't happen here, but we'll see if it happens in the big game. I think it's going to. I hope it's going to. But we'll see. It's going to be a great fun to watch, and one can only hope that the game will be as great as it was breaking it down with you two guys. Thank you so much, fellas, and thank you, everybody, for checking out FDH Lounge mini episode 1809.